So Apps is now going to give us a presentation. He has over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity and risk management. He has been applying and teaching quantitative risk analysis and management methods for over a decade. He is the founder and CEO of HealthGuard, a hospital enterprise risk management software provider, and the board president of the Society of Information Risk Analysts, SIRA, SIRA. He is also a member of the American Society of Hospital Risk Managers and the Open Group Security Forum, contributing to risk quantification standards and guidelines. So please join me in welcoming our Apps Garcia.
Fabulous response. So a couple of things. I just rolled off as board president. I'm past president now on November 1. So I think I sent that abstract to your board. Second thing is, I think Joe was mentioning how great the presentations were this morning, which I absolutely agree with. I want to recalibrate your expectations. Just bring it back down to earth. We're going to be grading this on a bell curve, and I'm going to help normalize the bell curve. So today's talk is going to be on cybersecurity decisions, cost-benefit analysis. Two things: the concepts here apply to every industry, and it's also apply outside of cyber. Right. So just to frame this properly, hopefully there's a nugget you'll take away from this discussion, this conversation today. And ultimately, with risk management, what is it about? It's about managing risk. It's about making risk-informed decisions, and that's what we're going to be driving towards with our discussion. Also, shame on you. I think this is the third time you've had me talk, so you're a glutton for punishment. This is good. Our mission to help hospitals realize value-based risk management, moving away from that kind of standard check-the-box compliance approach, which so many organizations use. How does enterprise risk and risk management in general deliver value, which was the source of my question to you? It's always a tricky thing. We'll see if we can add some context to that. Today's discussion, three primary focuses. One, the evolution of the CISO in healthcare specifically. I think someone may have mentioned that healthcare is 10 to 15 years behind every other industry. That's definitely the case here, but we've seen the role of the CISO in an organization change dramatically over the last decade, 15 years. We'll talk about the cost-benefit analysis itself, and then we're talking about using the CBA, the cost-benefit analysis, in the context of cyber risk management. And by the way, I was up at 2 this morning, so we should have been on Snapchat or Instagram, whatever you do these days. So when we talk about risk management in the frame of healthcare, hospitals specifically, according to ASHRM, the American Society of Healthcare Risk Management, there's 8 domains, and you can see them on the slide here. What we're going to be talking about today is the technology domain, but you know, patient safety is a big issue, operational risk, strategic risk, especially in the waters that hospitals are having to navigate right now with all the disruption in healthcare. There's huge strategic risk for hospitals and hospital systems. Obviously, financial risk, human capital. There's a ton of burnout. I just read a stat this morning that healthcare in last year in 2021 has lost over 3,300 in the U.S. Over 3,300 healthcare providers have just bailed. I mean, that's staggering. So the evolution of the CISO, as I'm sure those of us that have been, have bald spots and gray hair have seen, it used to be relegated to IT, right? The CISO was just some manager or maybe director level person that, hey, just go handle our security, go handle our passwords, that type of discussion, right? They would never see the light of the board, never see the big boys and girls table, as it were, right? And that has changed dramatically. I mean, when there are breaches that are making the headlines of the Wall Street Journal, when there are breaches that are costing organizations tens of millions of dollars, in some cases approaching $100 million plus, that's a problem. That's a business issue that, as Connie mentioned earlier, everyone is now on board, right? She's having tabletop exercises with executives and boards and leadership. Because why? Because they give a shit, right? They wouldn't be spending their time on this if they didn't care, if it wasn't a big problem to these organizations. So we've seen the maturation, the evolution of the CISO in organizations, and especially in healthcare. And in healthcare, You have a cyber event, and what happens when you have a cyber event in banking? You lose some money, right? What happens when you have a cyber event in healthcare? Well, HIPAA cares about PHI. That's all it cares about. It doesn't care about financial risk organization. It doesn't even really care about patient safety per se by the regulation. It cares about data. The other side of the equation is human harm, right? Patients get impacted, outcomes get impacted. I don't care what they say. If there's a major incident like we just saw at Dignity, if you're slowing down the diagnosis process of a patient, if you're slowing down the treatment process of a patient, you can't tell me that doesn't affect patients. I don't care what the PR people say. It affects patients. And then finally, all of that has a financial impact, right? It could have a direct financial impact from the event itself. It could have a financial impact due to a data breach if OCR investigates and issues a civil money penalty. And it could also have a financial impact when patients harm, and they bring back a class action or any kind of litigation. We were talking to legal counsel, one of our customers a few years back. This was a modest-sized health system, 3 or 4 hospitals. He said at any given time, they have 50 active lawsuits they're dealing with. 50. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're trying to run a business? That's tough. So in healthcare specifically, cyber has a lot of ramifications, lots of forms of loss and harm. And I'm sure in every one of our industries, you can probably apply the same type of thing, right? Even organizations that have SCADA systems, right? There's humans on the other side of those SCADA systems. If a dam goes, the grid goes, that's affecting human life, right? The headlines are rampant. Common Spirit, they're still recovering from the 3.5, 4 weeks later now. And they have hundreds of hospitals, right, across the country, including backyard. I just saw a press release that TriHealth was not impacted by it. Thank goodness, because that's my family's in Cincinnati. But again, these are issues that are literally life and death, literally life and death. Here's a scary fact. Back in 2016, 2017, OCR did basically a blame-free audit just to get the state of where are we at with our HIPAA compliance, where are we at with risk management, which is part of the law. That's not new. That's been around for decades. Where are we at? And they found that 94% of covered entities, which include hospitals, are failing at just the basic blocking and tackling of risk management. Now you could say, well, it's 5 years later. Sure, we've gotten better. Okay. So this is a bit of an eye chart. I'm not expecting you to read it. If you haven't read this before, I'm sure Connie's familiar with it. If you go to rafiqrehman.com, fantastic resource. This gentleman has, for the last 5-6 years, he's been mind mapping the responsibilities of the CISO. Fantastic resource. And you can see here that the evolution of what used to be a techie role, just go change my password, go install antivirus for me, is now you're dealing with obviously budgets, in some cases multi-million dollars, tens of million dollars, hundreds of million dollars budgets, right? Bank of America, holy cow, I was talking to one of their leaders, the number of people they have in their cyber team is bigger than some of my customers. The whole IT department, right? It's staggering. Business enablement, project delivery, obviously compliance and audit, risk management, which is huge, right? Governance and selling information security internally. Well, what does that mean? How do you sell information security? Well, you see a problem that you think needs fixed, and then you got to forbid someone to give you some money and maybe, God forbid, additional FTEs, right? To actually manage and operate that thing that you're installing, right? So you've got to have a compelling business justification, which is what we're going to be talking about today, right? So again, the CISO is kind of a plateful, and I'm sure if there's CISOs or people that report to CISOs, this is all old hat to you, right? One of the things that on the bottom here, focus areas for 2023 is training staff on business acumen and value creation. Oh, you're an IT guy, you're a cyber guy. What do you know about business value justification, right? Maintain the risk registry. What does that mean? List of risks, list of things that you care about, maybe things that go bump in the night. But again, we're having to game up or level up. I think it's a term used these days. I'll call it cool gamers. level up on our business acumen. We have to if we're going to have a seat at the table. We have to if we're going to have an intelligent business conversation and even understand how to begin to add business value, right? So, which leads me to the next slide. You got a sneak of it. Business acumen. Business acumen is one of the things he calls out. Business acumen is something we probably throw around, and that person has good business acumen. Well, what does that mean? This is a great slide. It's not my chart, but I like it. Just high level leadership skills. How do you lead without necessarily authority? You may not have the title, but how do you get people to do what you need them to do, what you want them to do? Motivation, market orientation, being aligned with the business, understanding who's your customer, understanding how you make your widgets, financial acumen, being able to talk dollars and cents to the people that are controlling the purse strings, right? Strategic thinking beyond the next budget cycle, thinking 3-5 years out so that you can plan. Obviously, your talk today was you built a vision for the program. You didn't do it just, okay, what's the next 30 days? You had to think strategically about the program, what the vision was for the program. Computing and technology, obviously, that's where a lot of us come from an IT perspective, and then analytical, logical thinking. Everyone here know Jack Jones? Jack Jones is the creator of FAIR. Where did he come from? Insurance company. Nationwide. He came from first CISO nationwide. And I love Jack's story of how he came up with FAIR. And we're going to talk briefly about FAIR. He said he went to his first presentation to the executive team and the board. He said, "Hey, I need $1 million." I said, "Okay, Jack, why do you need $1 million?" Because we've got all this risk. Because how much risk do we have? A lot. Okay, I give you that $1 million. How much risk do we have? Less. Right. That was his. So he realized he needed to have a better answer, right? Than that we were talking to business, right? So business acumen is keenness and quickness in understanding and dealing with a business situation, risk and opportunities, in a manner that is likely to lead to a good outcome. Additionally, this acumen has emerged as a vehicle for improving financial performance and leadership development. So again, understanding how are the people that are going to be making these decisions about where to invest their dollars, their precious dollars and headcount. How do you communicate with them? This last few years, cyber has had an open checkbook, right? We've had an open checkbook because ransomware scared the shit out of a lot of people. Well, talking to a CISO down in Cincinnati, he said his budget just got cut 30% last year, just locked. They didn't scrutinize it. They didn't say justify. They said, nope, 30% less, deal with it, move on. Right. So suddenly the open checkbook is now starting to tighten up. So you better be able to prioritize, you better be able to have a business conversation about the resources you're asking. Again, a little preachy here, so I apologize. But I'm right now just running out of coffee. Cost benefit analysis. So according to CDC, I like this definition, a way to compare costs and benefits of intervention, any kind of treatment, risk management parlance, where both are expressed in monetary units. Monetary units, let that resonate for a second. So some of the benefits from cyber, according to Harvard Business School Online, for cost benefit analysis, according to HBS, data-driven approach. So we're not just using the little finger. Jack used that a lot, little finger. That's about a medium, right? Yep. Make decisions simpler. Decision makers don't want to spend a lot of time analyzing and scrutinizing and doing all that's what they pay you. They pay you to bring them an issue, an analysis of the issue, and a recommendation, right? And then uncovering hidden costs and benefits. The things that is always cost overrun, right? Especially, I'll point it at me, vendors that come in, it's going to cost you, $100,000 over the next 3 years. That's your TCO. Well, $200,000 later, right? You're still in post-implementation trying to figure it out, right? So understanding what those hidden costs. Really simplified version of a risk management life cycle, right? Identification, analysis, and evaluate the risk against your appetite and tolerance. Treatment, avoid, transfer, mitigate, accept, and then monitor. So laser pointer, this kind of works here. So this cost benefit analysis really sits right here.
You had a laser pointer the whole time?
I was pointing it at you. So the CBA, the cost benefit analysis, sits right here, right? It's between the analysis and the treatment decision. So you're just trying to inform that decision. So another CDC slide here. So very simplified version of the CBA is looking at the monetary valuation of the, basically the benefits that you're expecting to get, return on investment, whatever you're going to call it, and then looking at the costs and subtracting the two, and hopefully the benefits outweigh the costs. Pretty simple. It's not rocket science. It can get kind of, the financial math can get kind of hairy, but this is pretty simple, straightforward. This is a great example, an outline, if you will, of what you can put into a CBA. By the way, there's no right answer here. Right? We have some customers that call them decision documents. It's basically a CBA, right? But it helps decision makers understand, okay, what's the background? What's the context here of the issue we're trying to address? What's the alternatives that you've considered? What's our current state? What is option 1, 2, 3, 4? And then what are you ultimately proposing? And why are you proposing that? Right. Costs, yeah, OpEx and CapEx, operating expense, capital expense. What's your recurring cost? And you roll all that into your basically your TCO, right? Over some expected life of the solution. Is it a 3-year or 5-year? Definite. Usually solutions, especially IT solutions, have some kind of shelf life. They're good for so long before you have to refresh, spend more money. Looking at benefits from both could be cost reduction, expense reduction, cost containment, right? It could be improving value to your customers. It generates more revenue. They say non-quantifiable benefits. Anyone a fan of Doug Hubbard here? Anyone heard of Doug Hubbard? Put that on the list of recommended reading. How to measure anything in business. How to measure anything. Google Doug Hubbard. One of probably the authority on measurement. And the book, the tagline of the book is measuring the intangibles of business or something like that. But he basically Doug talks about if it's important enough to the business, you can measure it. Don't care what it is. Even things that are big, yes, that's intangible, it's soft. No, you can measure it. He also talks about you actually have a lot more data than you think you have usually. And you actually need less data than you think you need in order to come up with a reasonable measure. So Doug's a fantastic resource in addition to Jack Jones. And then if necessary, and I rarely see this, especially for IT type decisions, from a cyber perspective, is net present value, the ratio, a payback period. These are typically CFO type calculations. You may be sophisticated enough in your IT organization that you have to come up with these, or at least get help with these. But these are other things you may want to include depending on, again, your type of decisions you're making and who you're presenting. So let me pause there, talking really fast. I think a couple more questions. How many people use CBAs at all? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We provide that to customers. Yeah. Good. Good. At least. Yep. No. Good. You're good. So what other tools do you use for decision making? Just out of curiosity, you're not using cost benefit analysis. What are you providing to your leadership? Even if they're the ones just making the recommendation, what do you typically provide or see provided? You're not the one doing it. We shoot from the hip a lot. The gut is a real thing. Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is that, cost benefit analysis, yeah, I can do that, but putting a dollar amount to it for a lot of things.
Well, and that's a great point because the costs are usually easy. You call up the vendor, the solution provider, and say, hey, I need a quote for blah. You may put in some fudge factor, okay, so I'm gonna need an FTE, yada, yada, yada. But then the benefit side, okay, if it's purely a risk mitigation, then how do you do with that? Well, again, we're going from a lot of risk to less risk.
Are we dealing with loss of market share, loss of customers, et cetera? Because in our case, that's what speaks. If I'm going to lose customers because they can get to the competition and with the mouse click, which they can, because we're an online company, yeah.
That's a great point, right?
Mhm.
That's revenue, right?
Yeah.
As customer, you can call it whatever you want, right? Even reputational impact. Well, that's revenue, right? Reputational harm is when customers don't want to do business with you; they want to do business with Bobby Jane now.
Yeah.
Well, that's money at the door, right? So you can measure that, you can estimate that, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. So to that point, as we're thinking about cyber investments, and I intentionally didn't go down the path of data and patient harm. Again, because the definition of cost benefit analysis was monetary, right? Both cost and benefit in monetary terms. So I stuck with financial. You can model harm and again, data loss. These are some of the things, if you've seen FAIR, if you've seen Jack Jones' work, you'll notice forms of loss, fines and judgments. And in healthcare, this is usually a big one. When OCR comes a knocking, that's a bad thing. Can be. Productivity, can't make your widgets, can't treat patients, or you can't, service your online customers, you can't make jewelry, whatever it is, your people can't do their job. Response cost, that's both direct response, so maybe your IT team is now spending 6 weeks trying to recover, or it could be legal response, because you're dealing with investigator, you're dealing with something, class action. Replacement cost, if you're dealing with a physical product or a facility, and then reputational harm, which again translates back to revenue. That makes sense? So as we start to think about how are we going to estimate that loss, these are some of the things you would want to consider. Risk analysis. All right, I may kill some sacred cows, but if you've heard me talk before, you know I'm good for that. All right, so when we deal with risk analysis, according to NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is the authority in our country, apparently, on measurement of anything, right? NIST. There's 3 types of risk analysis. There's qualitative, which is this. We're using colors, red, yellow, green, or some kind of verbal label, high, medium, low, critical, to estimate risk. How many people have seen or used a heat map like this?
Oh, yeah.
Just yesterday, right? This is kind of, I'll call it, I don't call it state of the art. This is kind of status quo. This is how most people look at risk. If you want to get a little more sophisticated, you can go to the second category, which is semi-quantitative, which is starting to put numbers, assign numbers to some model. This is a model of risk from OWASP. OWASP deals with software vulnerabilities of your companies, right? They do a lot of fantastic work in terms of identifying top 10 software vulnerabilities. They suck, though, at risk modeling because this is their model. I'll tell you why they suck. Right? So you see here they have threat agents, voluntary factors, and they're using these things, skill level, motive, opportunity, size, all this stuff to come up with an estimate of likelihood. Okay, likelihood. What's risk? Likelihood and impact. Well, that's a decent formula for risk, right? Down below, what's the impact? Well, technical impact. There's loss of confidentiality, availability, accountability, business impact, financial damage. All those look great. Makes sense. That's the impact. They come up with the impact, right? So now you've got a likelihood of a 4.375 and an impact of a 7.25, and that's high. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this? Well, actually, I'll give you a better clue. What's wrong with these numbers?
Yeah, well, how do they relate?
Yes, and yes, are they making it up, and how are they related? I'll give you the more mathematical definition. These are ordinal scales. They're not ratios. So Stanley Stevens, which is a very smart guy who submitted types of measurement scales. One of them is ordinal, which is just rank order, right? So if you stand next to me, you're taller than me, or Joe stand next to me, Joe's taller than me. That doesn't say how much taller. That just says that Joe is taller. That's an order. Joe's taller. In a race, we're running across the street. There's 5 of us. You come in first because you're young and nimble. I'm in third. Joe's in second because he's still going at it, right? So that's just order. You couldn't say a first times a second equals a third. You can't do multiplication with that. You can't do any kind of addition and subtraction technically multiplication and division with ordinal scales. It's absolute gibberish. And yet we do this all the time. Quick flashback to stats. You're a young lady that just came out of college. What's the maximum percentage you could have for a probability? 100%. That's equal to 1. 100% is 1. How the hell do you come up with a 4.375 for a probability or likelihood? It doesn't make any sense. I almost dropped the F.
Good job in stopping that. Thank you.
We're on TV, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. The other thing to keep in mind here is 4.375. That's 3 decimal points of precision.
Mm.
That's like NASA shit, which is just completely insane. There's no way that it's that precise of a calculation. When you have 3 decimal points of precision, you're saying that I'm very, 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 very accurate and precise with my estimate here. There's no way. It's complete gibberish. Now that I've beaten this up enough, know that you can't do math. If you walk away with one thing, don't do math. Don't do multiplication division with ordinal scales. Just don't do it. It's crap. Now on to quantitative. This is a report that came out from HHS, and when it came out, the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the body that regulates healthcare in the U.S., they're also the body that oversees HIPAA, that wrote and oversees HIPAA compliance. They talk about the value of quantitative. When this came out, I was so excited. It's like I've been preaching this for years, and finally somebody listen. Not really, they just came up with their own. But 2 things you can do with quantitative is you can perform cost-benefit analysis. It's good. Cost-benefit analysis, and it assists in determining how much risk-based capital to budget for. CFO may care about that. Probably. So elements of a quantitative risk analysis: identify the decision. A buddy of mine, Tony Martin Beggy, he was on the board with me at CIRA. When I first came up with this slide for a presentation at a conference, I had 6 of these, and I put them in front of him. I said, Tony, and he's a risk analyst at Netflix, senior risk analyst at Netflix. I said, Tony, here's what I'm thinking for this. What are the really core components of a quantitative risk analysis? He says, you got to identify the decision. They will not do a risk analysis unless he knows what business decision is trying to be made. Period. Won't do it. That's powerful.
Yes.
Right? Because otherwise, why are we doing the analysis? For compliance purposes?
Right.
We said we don't want to do that. We want to generate value for business. There's value to business if you're helping the compliance. So scratch that. Scratch that off the record. You need a scenario. What's the scenario under analysis? Right? And in fair parlance, there's an asset, a clearly defined asset. There's a clearly defined threat, and there's a clearly defined loss. Right? So you define your scenario. What model are you using? I showed you the OWASP model, and I'm going to show you like 3 different models you can use. But what model? Probability distributions. Often, like with the OWASP model, that's a discrete model. It's a single variable model that has no uncertainty built into it. What's a given with risk? Uncertainty. So you have to build a model that captures that uncertainty, that range of possibilities. If you get into a car accident tomorrow, right? You have a risk of a car accident. What's it going to cost you? Huh? It depends. Well, you just didn't say, oh, $7,000. Well, you don't know. Is it a scratch? Is it a fender bender? Did I kill a family? Mm-hmm. Right? Or did it? Sorry. Right? So there's a huge range of possibilities. Well, your model has to capture that range of possibilities. And if it doesn't, I would question it. Data, estimates for the values that go into your model, assumptions and rationale, always document your assumption and rationale, whatever model you're using. Monte Carlo simulation, which is how we do the math. We don't have exact numbers, like a 4 times a 5 equals 20. And then translation and communication. This was the other thing that Tony gave me, is that the analyst needs to know how to communicate and translate the output into something that's usable by a decision. Right? Tony's brilliant. So I'm going to give you 3 approaches to quantitative. And I'm going to show you that it can be super simple. Be a little hairier too, but it can be super simple. It doesn't have to be hard. On our website, I'm going to give you these links to these resources. There's a free download. This is built this because we wanted to give people an alternative to the risk matrix. I railed about OWASP, I railed about the risk matrix. I didn't rail about the risk matrix. They suck. Just take my word for it. The basic risk calculator is a simple 2-variable tool that you can go download right now for free and plug in 2 variables and basically replace the risk matrix with a quantitative model that mathematically is 100 times better. It's free. You don't need any plugins. It's using something called SITMath, which is a plugin that we use to build the model, and it's running 10,000 Monte Carlos, which basically means it's going to be more accurate. How am I doing on time?
You've got about 10 minutes.
So this is what it looks like, the basic risk calculator. Again, I'll give you the link. The first thing you do is you enter your scenario. Remember, you've got to have a clearly defined scenario. You enter your likelihood percentage. You enter your range for impact. Here it's 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, and 5 million, or whatever it is, range of possibilities. You can't see it, but right here, you're able to plug in a dollar amount. In this case, you're asking the model, what's the probability of exceeding $1 million? And on this sheet, this will be in the download, I think it should be done for you. It says 2%. Let's go back to Jack's question. How much I spend $1 million, I have a lot of risk, I have less risk, that's not very helpful. But if I said you currently have 50% probability of a loss of $1 million or more on an annualized basis, and now you're down to 2%, well, that's a little more helpful, right? And then you have your rationale and assumptions down here. Again, this is a very simple model. 2-variable model. It's not meant to solve world peace, right? It's meant to replace a really shitty risk matrix, and it's free. This is tool number 1. Tool number 2 is FAIR, right? And it's actually 2 and 3. FAIR. If you haven't seen it, again, Jack Jones is brilliant. He actually is works with a competitor of ours now. He actually helped found a competitor of ours called Risk Lens. I want to thank him for our competition. Jack did a lot of work. There's a book on FAIR. Highly recommend. If you just Google or go on Amazon, research FAIR, Jack Jones, you'll find this. There's an organization called the FAIR Institute that is part of Risk Lens's kind of education and marketing program. A lot of good information on FAIR. Don't have time to get into it. This is what the model looks like. We use FAIR for both cyber risk and operational risk for our customers. It's not just for IT. There's the Open Group who maintains the Open FAIR standard, which is now the international standard for quantification. Pretty much, there's not another one out there. They have a free download. I'll give you the link for this as well. For downloading this FAIR Excel-based FAIR tool, which also, ironically enough, uses SITMath. Organization, Sam Savage, out of Stanford University, he developed this thing called SITMath, which is how you do math with stochastic models. Auditable, it's pretty awesome. So that is this. You can build a FAIR model, and the cool thing about this is you can do a current and a proposed. So think about inherent and residual risk, right? So you can build 2 simulations, one with here's our as is, and then the second one with whatever control you're trying to implement, estimations on that, and it gives you the 2B. Right? Totally free. Now the one that's not free, which is ours. So all we do is focus on healthcare, and Lynn's going to give you a commercial on us. But we just do healthcare risk management. That's all we do. Specifically hospitals, not just all hospitals. Our tool is called Decipher Risk. This is a risk register. Going back to the CISO's responsibilities, trying to build a risk register. Can't see it here, so this kind of sucks. But here's quantitative values. So you're able to compare one scenario versus another scenario side by side. Which risks do we care about? Which risks are worse, and help you prioritize, decide where to focus. This is kind of the money slide because it goes back to helping make a decision. Here we have a loss exceedance curve, and once you go and read some of the coverage work, you'll understand what this means. But you have the current risk, which is up here, the red line, and then residual risk, which is here, the blue line. This is a whisker box plot of the same two scenarios being compared side by side. But this is the cool part. Here we have put in a dollar value, like $1 million. You're looking at your as-is risk on an annualized basis. What's the expected loss? This is saying you have a 40% chance of a $1 million loss on an annualized basis. Over here, after you implement your control, it's down to 4%. Right? So you're able to do comparative analysis, which is really what you're trying to do. So again, you could do the same thing outside of our platform using this free Excel download from the open group. You have to give them your email, which is okay. Open group is awesome. Nonprofit. And then you could also do it this way, but you're going to have to create two spreadsheets. And this model is, again, two variable. Fair is a lot more detailed, right? Going to give you a better result. But if you want something quick and dirty, this is. Here are the resources. And you'll have this on the download. I think I sent these to you, so you should have a download them on the website. You go to opengroup.com and download the OpenFair tool. You can go to our website, healthguardsecurity.com/basic risk calculator. And I think I cut out there, R at the end, and download that tool, or you can go check out our Decipher Risk. I added this at the last minute, powering through. I was fortunate enough, and this is an InfraGard book, the EMP SIG for InfraGard. I was fortunate enough to be invited to contribute to this last edition of it, 2021 edition. If you want to read something that's going to keep you up at night, maybe you don't. This is scary stuff. This talks about basically the vulnerability of our grid and our dependence on our grid. And I contributed to the cyber section along with some other really smart people. Again, grading on a bell curve. They picked me up. And we took a hard look at, from a national security standpoint, what are the issues with our grid and what's our dependence? I can tell you right now, if your DR plan, if you're not thinking about solar weather, solar flares, space weather, I know it sounds like mumbo jumbo, you should. There's something called a dark sky event that if we lose part of our grid or all of our grid in this country due to solar weather, which those of us a lot more frequently than you think. We had one in the late 1800s, took out our telegraph system in the US. Imagine telegraph systems robust, pretty thick cables and wires and circuits that are just tap, tap, tap. Think about the nanotechnology and micro technology we have in our ICs, on your phone. We get any kind of EMP event, whether it be man-made or natural, technology is gone at scale. This is stuff that we all should be thinking about. So not to be horror story, but yeah, this great book, and recommend that. So really fast, maybe a couple minutes left for questions or no?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
So do you provide kind of a simple case study of cybersecurity, case study for analyzing risk? Is there anything like that?
Case study, we're actually trying to get a case study published. We're waiting for the customer. And the case study we have was actually pretty cool. It was a insurance company, healthcare managed care provider in Ohio. They had a call center that was critical for their business. They were trying to decide, do we continue our DR relationship with, I want to say it was Iron Mountain. And so it was a 7-figure relationship. So through quantitative analysis, we're able to look at all the different all hazards approaches. We're looking at technology, earthquake, we're looking at they're concerned about active shooters or any kind of other disruption, weather, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're able to put them side by side. Here's your current risk, here's where you think you're at. And basically they were able to justify to their leadership, their board, not to have to renew that contract. It wasn't mitigating the risk they thought they were going to do. So basically they took $1 million plus and put it back into the business. Not in IT, but giving it back to the business. That's value generating risk management. Right? But the CISO who owned DRBC was able to confidently make that decision. She used our analysis, but she also talked to her team and legal team and others to make sure it was a well-informed decision. But it that was our case study. Again, we're still waiting to get that.
If you're working that, is there any kind of simple user guide that says, this is what people in this field, this is how you think about it?
Oh, for which one?
Any of them.
Yeah. So in this tool here, we actually provide some examples and we provide some information about Charvel.
Okay.
And you can reach out to us anytime.
I didn't have
Even if
no
you're not in
problem
healthcare.
with that.
Yeah, we're just evangelists for better responses. Any other questions? All right, told you I was going to lower the bar.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Very much, yes, for that presentation. And I believe you said that the next step